Discover the Women in Tech Trailblazers podcast, hosted by Tiffany, Benitez, and Jordan Franklin. Here, the complexities of being a woman in the tech industry are unraveled through discussions on key issues, personal growth, and how to succeed despite systematic challenges. It's a source of empowerment and inspiration for all women at all stages of their tech careers. We are super excited to be here today. We are super excited for the guests we have today. We are here with Tammy Waggoner, and I am super excited about the topic that we have. So we're really going to talk about using data to build our futures. And so a topic that I think is becoming more and more prevalent in the industry as we move more and more towards AI and companies, thinking of data-ish in the past, but now it's really having to move to the front of their minds. And I think there are some things that we as women can tap into, even for our own selves and our careers, right? Really understanding data. So I'm going to intro Tammy. So Tammy is the practice leader for CPG retail at Newsot, a boutique data and analytics consultancy. In this role, she oversees strategy, business development, and thought leadership to drive value for clients in the data analytics space. With over 30 years, did you hear that? 30 years, Tammy, you must have been like 10 when you started, of experience spanning finance, program management, transformation, systems implementation, and sales enablement. Tammy is passionate about improving efficiency through process optimization and data-driven insights. Drawing on her years of industry expertise at companies like Tyson, Hillshire Brands, and Sara Lee, she brings a fresh perspective to consulting, helping organizations achieve impactful results through outcome-driven projects. Tammy, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Welcome. So happy to have you. We always like to kick off the show with really asking a question about what authenticity means to you. What does that word mean to you? How does it impact your habits and your daily actions?
Yeah.
That's kind of the first question.
Excellent. Yeah. So, well, first of all, thanks for having me. I did have to adjust my little, it was 20 years for a really long time. And then finally I was just like, admit it, it's more than that. So that's what it is. I think authenticity to me, as a woman in tech or really in any profession means first and foremost kind of being self-aware, right? Knowing your strengths and your values and your beliefs and owning them. And I think you won't be observed or felt as authentic without knowing yourself, right? And that's harder than you think because there's lots of external forces pushing you to stray or drift from who you really are or what you believe in any given moment. So I think when you stray from that too, right? Because you can feel it and you can tell, and so can others, right? So as soon as you drift from it, it's obvious. And so pay attention to that. I pay attention to that. It's a warning for me that, maybe something's not right in the zone. And then just in general, like for me, it's kind of being myself and recognizing where I'm good and where I need help and about saying it like it is. And I think that helps others do it too. That's been my leadership style. It's the way I talk. I don't try to be more than I am. I admit when I don't know something. I'm not afraid of that. Some people are. I'm not afraid to share the struggles, the successes. And in my experience, it's been that people lean into that, right? So that's kind of where I stand on authenticity. And it's hard. It's hard to continue and keep it up, but it's important.
I love it. Okay. So we read your bio. We heard all the amazing things and honestly, the really cool places that you've worked. I will tell you one of my favorite things about working with you when I was on the tech side and you were on the business side is there are not a lot of stakeholders that actually truly dig in and want to understand and know the data. So they're making right decisions for the business. So talk to us a little bit about your career journey, how even when on the business side, how you really tried to take the data, understand that, plug into what tech overall was doing, and what did that look like for you on that journey?
Yeah. So my professional journey has been quite a journey. I actually started out in finance, so I've been very numbers driven kind of my whole career, pretty driven as a young person, right? I got my certified management accounting designation when I was very young, pursued a role in finance, worked at Accenture for a long time internally. I wasn't an external consultant. I was an internal person, got some management experiences, a lot of areas, and did a bit more like project management, kind of ended up project management, project opportunities. And then that gave me kind of a love for process. And so I really am a process girl, like through and through. I love process. I think process is amazing. And I knew the numbers from my background. So it really helped to kind of bring it all together, right? And then process inevitably gets you to problem solving for broken processes because there's lots of those around, right? So I found that I was really pretty good at that. So kind of fast forward, because I'm pretty old and this would be a long story if I went through the whole thing. So I ended up in a role in sales enablement, and it started with developing training. And that was new to me completely. Like I had never been in training before. But as I researched and learned about sales training programs and developing programs, it's one of those things that's really hard to measure, right? Like it's hard to measure the success of training in the business world, right? You can measure like I learned something, but did you apply it and did it actually result in something, right? So that was kind of the start of my journey into like understanding data and really like trying to figure out what it can tell you. So, fast forward a little bit more, I took on more and more in that sales enablement space, like trade systems and CRM and management reporting and analytics and customer service and logistics and all kinds of different things that all require data to be able to be successful. And so that's when I kind of got pretty involved at the enterprise level, right? Because like we needed all that data. We didn't necessarily have a strategy, and I wanted to kind of help contribute to that because like you need I wanted the investment from an enterprise level, right? Because you end up with not enough funding in your own group to be able to make the things happen that you need to happen. So trying to push that at an enterprise level and try to get more strategy there. So that's kind of how I ended up in data. And then, when I left that role, it turns out the company that I hired that I learned a lot from actually about data ended up hiring me as their business person. And so like it flipped, right? Like, so there I was kind of a business person working with data. And now I'm almost like a data person working with the business, right? So I'm trying to like help the data people understand more about business so that they can solve more problems with data in business. So it's been a really kind of interesting journey. Never thought I would end up kind of in the tech space kind of with data, right? But I do think just that business background just has such a big impact on trying to figure things out in a way that makes a difference for the business,
Well, and I will say, real quick. I will say that I think we've said it multiple times, like throughout our podcast, like you don't always have to be in technology to be in technology. And I think your career path really shows that.
Yeah.
I was just going to tee off a little bit of what you were saying there of like, I think we have a lot of people that ask the questions of how do I get into tech? Right? Because this is now, again, like it's a popping industry. Like I think I shared a list on LinkedIn a few weeks ago of like the jobs that are being phased out and the ones that are coming in, right? And so a lot of like technology roles, a lot of generative AI. And so that's the reality of our future, like it or not. So the other thing that we also talk about a lot is that we need to stop looking at tech as certain titles and roles in companies and start looking at it on how each and every one of us, regardless of what industry we're in and what job we're in, we're using it. But I do love how like your like curiosity and love for like understanding behind what you're doing led to you actually leading something that you used to be the one asking the questions. And I think that that's a really good example. Most women actually end up in tech by accident. Like we didn't study it. You know what I mean? We stumbled upon it at some point in our career. But I think it's really awesome to see people that have journeys like yours of like, hey, I really just wanted to understand and I dug in and I used the resources around me. That's key, right? Like we own our careers. Yeah. We own what that looks like next. And so I just love seeing that on the other side has paid off for you.
Yeah. And it's really like, it's hard, right? You go into a different area of business and you get to a point in your career where you're successful, you understand a lot of things, you can add a lot of value, and then suddenly you're like learning something again, right? But I think we have to get used to that, and young people these days have to really get used to that, because I think, and I've learned this in kind of the training space, is that like the evolution of jobs going forward for our children are going to be very different, right? Like you're going to have to learn whole new careers, you're going to start out in one and it's just going to go away. Like that whole process is going to go away and it's going to be automated and you're going to need to learn more. And companies are going to have to get used to that too, retraining employees and getting them different skill sets so that they can continue to thrive within companies. So it's just going to be an interesting time, right? As my kids grow up and get into the workspace.
No, I absolutely agree with you. And I think some of the things that we talk about is like, what are some of those hurdles and challenges that you've had getting into your career? But I think you've also outlined what our kids are going to have to go through, right? Like they're going to have to learn complete new things that we can't even think about what that is for them. And then go from there. And that's crazy to even think about. Like we don't even know what that looks like for them.
Yep.
But what was that journey for you? What were those hurdles that you overcame to get into the seat that you're in now?
Yeah. I think different hurdles. I've done some other things in my career too. Like we went out and we bought apartment buildings for a while, and and then we did that and flipped them, and it was really fun. But I had to come back into the business world after a long time out of it, right? And that was a challenge. And so one of the things I learned there is, right, like never let go of a relationship because it's going to help you in the future, right? So I had some really good advocates for me when I came back back to Sara Lee that advocated for me, even though I had been out of industry for a long time, both like childcare and some other, business ventures. So I think, keeping that in mind. But I know, we talked a little bit before this about gender bias too. And you see that a lot in, you see it in tech, you see it in every business, right? Yeah. And it shows up in like subtle ways and it shows up in more overt ways, right? Like, for example, getting a promotion, but then having the role downgraded and still a promotion, but not the level that it was before that the man had, right? Not that I'm bitter about that, but it happens, right? But, I think just in general, in business, you have to advocate for yourself and not be afraid of that, right? It's important. For me, I've often, like, I didn't do it a lot early in my career, and I've done it more later in my career. And I think it's important to start earlier than that. Like, that's what I'm going to tell my daughter, right? And even if it doesn't get the result that you're looking for, at least you did it, right? Like that's the most important thing, I think, because like you don't want to have the regret that I didn't even ask the question. Like, so now I'm like, I'm not afraid to ask the question. I'm just going to ask the question, right? And then I think just in general for women, I've gone through a lot of different, like, women BRGs and things like that, right? Where you learn a lot of stuff. And one thing that resonated with me one time, and I've taken something from it, is just in the subtle ways that women get ignored or overlooked in a meeting. And, so like an example was like, if you see a woman who asks a question and somehow it gets ignored, just tactfully interrupting and bringing it back to that person, right? And it's pretty easy and it doesn't have to be confrontational. It's just, thanks for that. Let's come back to that after we answer Sandra's question, right? Like, you don't have to be disrespectful to the ones being disrespectful, right? Like, but you have to be obvious, right? And so, like, overcoming that as you move through your career and then bringing that with you and helping others that are in that situation, right? So don't overlook it. Don't let it go. Don't ever let it go, because it becomes the culture, right? So just making sure that you're really, really paying attention,
I think when we talk about, okay, let's be real. I think we're talking about careers and we're talking about our journeys on purpose, because the bulk of our audience are in some way, shape, or form, are in some type of path in my career, regardless of what that is, what industry that is. And each of us want to learn and grow in some way, shape, or form. So when we talk about career progression, I'd like you to talk about just how do we as women, like, how can we really tap into and leverage data in a way that will take our career to another level? And listen, another level doesn't always have to be the next title up, right? Yeah. Like thinking strategically, because here's the other thing. Strategy is key in everything, not just in the way that a business runs. Like even how you run your life needs to be very strategic. How you run your career needs to be very strategic. However, when you talk about how do you make strategic decisions, you don't do that without data. So talk to me a little bit about what you think of on that.
Let's take a moment to thank our sponsors, Women in Technology of Northwest Arkansas and Gumption at my-gumption.com for their support. Their contributions are critical in bringing these meaningful conversations to you. Stick around for more engaging discussions right after this break.
Yeah, I think unlike my approach, which was a bit more opportunistic in my career, right? Like there was definitely not a lot of data involved in me making some of the decisions I made in my career, but I think that's okay. It worked out, right? But I really think women have an opportunity to use data to identify what they want, right? Whether that's like trends in the job market or evaluating a company's diversity metrics, if that's what you're interested in, right? And I know, Tiffany, you did a lot of research as you moved on to the next role for you. Even analyzing skill gaps in fields that you're thinking about, right? So if you're thinking about a field, like maybe do a little research on it and what are the skill gaps there and where can I focus, right? I think figuring out just what's important to you and trying to find that, right? There's so much information available, with AI now to do the research, right? So like imagine you're even like if you're thinking about considering a job at a new company before accepting the offer, you look at some publicly available information, right, on Glassdoor or diversity reports, and you gauge kind of whether they invest in growth for women, right? Whether that's lateral or up the ladder, right? But by comparing that, you can see, and perhaps you choose the one with the highest percentage of women in leadership positions so that you set yourself up to be mentored by a female leader in an organization, right? And that's not the only thing. Like you've got to, like in any organization that you go to, you've got to have diversity in your own mentorship, right? Like it's not saying like, hey, the women are going to get you to where you need to go, right? But seeing yourself, and I've heard this from, any person who's looking for diversity, is seeing yourself in a position that you want to be in gives you hope that you can get there, right? And so I just think, there's so much available for us and our young generation to be able to figure things out that we couldn't figure out when we were younger, right? Like we didn't have that information available to us to make those decisions. But it starts with, what do you want, right? Like it always has to start with you, I think, and what are you looking for, and really thinking through that. So yeah, it's amazing what's available to us now. I mean, yeah, I could go on and on.
I think one thing that data really helps us do is stay away from emotional decisions. Okay. Because sometimes, let's just be real. So sorry, not sorry, but innately we tend to make a lot of emotional decisions as females. But if you're making decisions based on facts, like solid data, then there's no emotion about it, right? Like it either is or it isn't. And to what degree, and then you get to choose, right? So
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think that data you can take into like community support groups and all of that. Like there's always data behind a lot of your decisions. Just some of us are innate researchers and some of us aren't, and being a researcher is so much easier now. It's not hard. You can go out and find that information. But we always love to understand like how, what community support groups would you recommend? But also B, like, how did you get involved and how did you find them and why do you work with them?
Yeah. I think, women in tech, obviously, right? So getting involved in that. Next Up has been something that I've been involved in for a number of years. I think for me, it's that, that sense of community, that sense of belonging. For me now, it's the remote work that really I need some outlet where I can actually be with people, right? Like it's hard to be in your office all the time by yourself, and you're on meetings, but you don't get that kind of like banter or like tossing around ideas, right? So ensuring that I'm finding somewhere where I can just have conversations with folks that are outside of my house, right? So that's important to me. But yeah, I think the other area is LinkedIn, that has grown in importance in kind of opportunities to meet people. And I think it's kind of amazing how willing people are. If you see something that's interesting on LinkedIn that you want to connect with someone about, people are so willing to connect with you on topics that you're interested in. Just the other day, saw someone who had posted something about taking a break from a really high level job and was, just searching for kind of what the next step was. And I responded to her and I just said, I did the same thing and it was really interesting. And I learned a lot about myself by taking that break and what I really wanted and what I was good at and what I wanted to do with the rest of my career. And she reached back out and was like, hey, can we talk? I've seen other people kind of talking about this and I'd love to get your perspective on how it worked for you. And like, I'm struggling with that. Right. So I just think it's fascinating how much more connection you can make on social, but still get a real connection with someone. Right. So that's been really good for me over the last year as I've kind of switched up my career.
And I think you pointed out something great there. So like with LinkedIn, as long as you're not just selling, you can make great connections, right? Because we all get those sales emails and we're like, ooh, don't want to read that. But if you make the connection and you have something interesting, we all want to talk about the things that we're interested in, and you can make that connection, right? But I feel like sometimes it's abused, but I absolutely agree. I think LinkedIn's become a great sounding board too, even, right? Like putting information out there and just seeing the feedback that you can get from it is really interesting too. Especially in the startup world, there's been a lot of help come from that just by saying, hey, we don't know where to go.
Yeah.
We're going to have to take it an extra step though, because the tools can be there and the tools are great. But if you don't have the courage to reach out and talk about, Tammy, and ask the questions on a topic that mostly we don't talk about that. Like, oh, I took a break. Let me tuck that away. Like, I don't need to talk to anyone about that. Or like, I don't know. Like sometimes there's like, we think there might be certain stigma or things that come across with certain things. So I think that it's going to take us coming out of our like pretending we have it all together and like, heaven forbid someone should know like, I need help in navigating this and I should tap on resources to do that. And that is not our norm right now as women. In general, I'm making general statements. I'm sure that some of us do it, some don't, but in general, we don't. So I think we're going to have to keep creating spaces. Number one, standing up and doing that because you create freedom for another woman. Like maybe the lady you reached out to never would have, you know what I mean? If you hadn't reached out, she probably wasn't reaching out to someone else like, hey, I went through this thing. Let me help you, because we just don't talk about the struggle. So I think we need to commit to ourselves as women overall, and honestly, men too. I'm sure they deal with some sort of this as well. But we need to commit to do it anyways. Like, just ask the question, ask her for help. Instead of being petty and jealous when you see someone doing amazing things, why don't you connect with her and be like, hey, like, how do I do that?
Yeah.
Like, that's some humility and some pride, but like, mostly everyone's mostly willing to help. And you know what I mean? For you to reciprocate and learn from each other. But I just think we're going to have to step out of what's been comfortable for us for so long, or it's just not going to change.
Yeah. That vulnerability, right? Like it's hard to be vulnerable and show your cards a bit, but I do think it makes a difference because to your point, people are willing to help. Like, and especially like if you're young in your career and you're trying to learn stuff, you have to ask the question in order to learn, right? If you want to grow, people have to know that you want to grow in something, right? And so then you have to admit, I'm not good at it yet, right? And that's okay. Like you can't be good at everything all the time, right? And then when you get to a leadership position, you have to admit the areas that you're not good and you build a team that has that skill set so that you support each other. So that's where growth comes, right? Like you don't have to own it all. You don't have to do it all, but you have to build a group around you that can get it done, right? And so that goes back to the authenticity answer, right? Like self-awareness, like what are you good at? What are your strengths? What are your weaknesses? How do you either grow in them or build them through your team, right? Like it's just kind of common sense. And that's just another thing that I like in my whole career, I have said, like, we don't use enough common sense, like in general, right? And I think it's really important with data and AI because like it's going to start giving us answers that we need to question and ensure that it makes sense, right? And I had a boss of mine that had this greatest saying that I will never forget, like, let's not build a rocket ship to cross the street, right? And it's just like you get caught up in the moment of building something or creating something, and then you realize, like, what problem were we trying to solve? And we were just trying to cross the street, man. Like, what are we doing here? So I just think common sense is underutilized these days, and I've built my whole career on common sense, I feel like, so it's interesting.
Love it. Okay, so as a leader, and I don't just mean by title, I mean, honestly, how you carry yourself, the way you show up in any room, right? It's not even just like a professional work meeting. So as a leader, as you continue to like exemplify that for so many of us, it's kind of two-pronged. Number one, what legacy do you really want to leave behind for our generation, the next generations to come? So number one, the legacy. And then number two, leaving our audience with one final piece of advice, which may tag team together, but just really, if you could leave them with anything, what would that look like?
All right, good. Okay, so legacy. I probably want it to be a couple of things. So, like, I definitely hope to be remembered as someone who advocated for people and had their backs, like really had their backs, right? Like they trusted me, I had their backs, and that it inspires new leaders coming up to do the same. Like, have your team's back always, no matter what. Even if they screw it up, talk to them about it after, but have their back, So I think that's something that I really have embraced, and really empowering people to challenge and always be looking at things in a different way. I think people have told me that, who've worked for me, that I'm always challenging. I'm always asking them to dig deeper. Things aren't usually what they appear, like digging in, finding a better answer, a better way to do something, a better process, always improving, right? And with technology, there are just so many ways to do that now. And I think if I think about the other thing, I would come back to the common sense, comment, right? Like just bring some back into the world. So that's kind of the legacy that I would like people to think about when they think about me from a leadership perspective. And I think when I want to come back to your like one advice thing. So I think using that technology today to really free up time to think about how you stand out, right? Like, so I think we used to get mired in research and data and trying to find the answer that we just didn't have time to think anymore. And so research is much easier now. So how do you use that? And then don't just waste the time you saved, right? Use that freed up time to think about how you stand out, track your growth, seeing where you're improving, where you might need to focus, and find someone to help you on the areas you want to improve on, right? So just adding thinking back into the data so that you're really standing out from the crowd. And I think it goes back to your comment about tech, right? And like, no disrespect to tech people, but sometimes tech people are very tech focused, right? And if you're in data and tech, you can stand out by thinking about the data that comes out of the tech, right? So I think, that's what I would say is just try to find ways to stand out, and that requires some thought.
It's also getting uncomfortable. I think, again, we all like do our school, we pick a career, maybe it works out, maybe we go into another industry, but I think it's important to be super open-minded and not just focus on the thing you're trying to deliver. I think that is a struggle for a lot of folks in technology. It's very much in like, what is the task I'm on? What is the role that I'm in? And actually, we had some conversations on this week as well. As we actually move forward, the roles will be fluid. So you will no longer be like an engineer. And think about it. This has kind of happened over time. So think about project, right? When we ran projects and then we moved to product. Okay. So we needed to really work in agile and product. We needed full stack developers. It used to be like, oh, I'm a Python developer. Like I'm front end, right? So it's going to continue even as we move forward, not even in just that aspect, but I think we're going to see a major influx of role fluidity. Like it's no longer going to be like, oh, my title is I'm the product manager or I'm the project manager and I collect requirements. Yeah. Like it's not. Like you're going to need to know and understand like, what does that mean from a design perspective? What does that mean? It was a really interesting topic as we talked about data this week, that as we move forward with this technology and in ways that we're going to have to understand it, like our roles are also going to change. I think that goes back to what you said for our next generation too. And like for our kids, like it's not going to look anything like what it does now. And so just trying to stay ahead of that is going to be crucial for each and every one of us.
Yeah, I think that in my mind, because I'm a process, it goes back to process, right? Like end to end, think through things, right? Across, like, not just this impact, but like, what's the trickle down? What's the upstream? What are the impacts of that process? And not being afraid to like embrace it or embrace change, or like when you're asked to do something, do it. Try to figure it out. Like that's always been successful for me in my career. Like people ask me to do things and I'm like, I have no idea how to do that. And they're like, you're good with white space. You'll figure it out. Right. So that's okay. Like, that's great. Okay. Yeah, I'll figure it out. And I do. So never be afraid to take a chance on, if they're taking a chance on you, it's because they believe in you. Right. So look it in the eye and take the chance and learn something new. So I think that's important.
I love it. My cup is super full. I could probably sit here all day and go on and on about this just because it's such a topic that's near and dear to me. But thank you so much for joining us today. We are super grateful that you took time out of your schedule just to be with us, as well as our listeners. Lots of valuable nuggets of wisdom and insights that I'm sure will apply to each and every one of us, regardless of what your career is, regardless of where you're at in your life. So thank you again so much for joining us. To our listeners, thank you so much for tuning in and continuing to support and follow us along the way. Jordan?
Subscribe, watch, follow, all the things.
So at the end, you will always see our guests' socials come across the screen. So you will see Tammy's LinkedIn and information there. Go out and follow her. She, with Newsot and just overall, is doing some really incredible things in the data space. And then just, again, the places that she shows up outside of a career and how she shows up and advocates for people is something that you don't see very often. So connect with her. She just said that like LinkedIn is powerful and she likes connection. So make sure and connect with her. And thank you again for joining us.
Well, that's a wrap. Another episode of Women in Tech Trailblazers podcast. Thanks for tuning in and sharing this time with us. If you liked what you heard, please share this episode with your friends in tech. And don't forget to subscribe to our podcast. Your support helps us keep bringing in inspiring guests and uncovering topics that matter to you. Until next time, keep pushing boundaries and making your mark in the tech world. Goodbye for now.